Duncannuva, and today's video is a bit of a reminder to to New Zealanders, both Maori and Pakeha, that whilst New Zealand is a land of freedom, it was also one of the many formerly under British occupation. For those of you who are new and don't know what happened, well, essentially Britain wanted to create the largest empire known to man. And to do so, they took countries like Canada, the New England, the 13 states in the United States of America, Hong Kong, and several provinces in China, New Zealand, Australia, Malaysia, which I won't be talking about there because Malaysia is a very, very controversial topic for me. India, South Africa, and of course Australia. And before we get out of the way, Australia was created as a penal colony by the British to send a lot of their prisoners. And we're going to start with this. So we're going to start with what led to this video, this Dan New Zealand video. A former Samoan football team. So he's Samoan, so he's from Samoa. He was probably born in New Zealand. I pretty much don't know and don't care because I don't care about football stars. I think they're overrated. Me personally. Went on a racist rant about Asians and Indians bitching about why there's no Indian award or why there is no Asian award, and he mentioned how hard done by the Maori were. You know, the Maori, several acts were passed in 1800s and the 1900s by the British against the Maori population. Keyword there, British, i.e. the people from the United Kingdom, i.e. England, not Scotland or that. These people passed a bunch of things to quote, civilize the Maori population, the local iwi tribes, all over New Zealand. This would result in 1840, the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, which is a treaty, one of the first treaties, and probably one of the few treaties that you will find in which an uncivilized tribe, excuse the noise, and the background noise, signed with British powers. Okay, I hear you going, but what does that have to do with it? Well, a lot of people love to forget that New Zealand's Maori were actually treated as compared to the Indians, the Native Americans, I don't know who lived in Canada at the time, but I'm not going to talk about the Canadians, but the Pakistanis, the Burmese, the Malaysians, the Aborigines, and even the South Africans and the Boers were actually treated a lot worse than what the Maori give them credit for. Yes, the Treaty of Waitangi didn't hold through, and you know, oh hey, we lost land. Yeah, but the Maori weren't removed from their homes, shot if they resisted. Well, I'm pretty sure they were. According to New Zealand history, they weren't, though. And basically had open hunting plastered on them. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what happened to the Aborigines. They lost land, houses, population, and were pushed out of areas by these British, well, quite nasty British people. Because they refused to obey British rule. This also happened to the Indians, and I do believe to the Malaysians. You know? Some of the other countries. While some Indians were given quite good respect by the British, not all were. There are actual stories of Indians being unjustly killed. Very few Maori ever had that happen. But before we go, we're going to talk about our neighbor first. Yes, Australia, we're talking about you. So why am I going to be talking about the Aussies, mate? Well, first of all, Australia was set up as a penal colony, as where Britain was going to end all of her, well, quite nasty people, you know. They're prisoners. This meant that the people who arrived in Australia as, you know, as colonists weren't actually right. They were quite nasty people. But they weren't treated like the South Africans were. British, cool. Because they were treated even worse. The Boers, by the way, were former Dutch colonists who had left Dutch powers during the war between Britain and co. Why? Because about what was happening at the time and wanted to be free. So when the Dutch lost their colonies in South Africa, the Dutch population who lived there fled and became the Boers. And the South Africans fought with them. Let's not forget that the Boer Wars also saw the introduction of concentration camps. That's right, if you think Nazi Germany used concentration camps first, yet it was the British. Let's not forget, a lot of New Zealanders and Maori fought in the Boer Wars and were quite nasty towards the Boers. And by the way, Boers is spelled B-E-O-R, not B-O-A-R. Not the animal, what the Dutch were called. And because of the Boers, the South Africans absolutely hated the British, as did the Aborigines, and both lost land. Lots of land. In fact, former Aboriginal ancestral places were disturbed by these British penal colonists and British colonists in South Africa. If you know the Battle of Rorke's Drift, a place where a British hospital put up a fight against the Zulu warriors, there were multiple skirmishes between them. Why? Because the Zulus, like the Aborigines, were being treated a damn sight worse. Oh, Duncannuva, what about the Maori? What about them? As compared to most other countries, including, but not limited to, the Canadian Eskimos, the Native Americans, and even the Malaysians and Indians, the Maori had a pretty easy job. Yes, they had their, fishing. The worst that we got were imprisonment, forced conscription, shit like that. But here's the thing. New Zealand up until 1987, or 1947, one of the two dates, was a British colony. Was still under British rule. Quite late into our life. We are actually one of the few we're the last colonized country. And yes, there have been questions like, what if the French colonized? We would have been treated even worse. There are tales of Syrian slaves in the Caribbean getting their hands chopped off by French. The Belgians completely murdered Congolese people because they could. I don't know what the Dutch did, I don't know what the Germans did, because we don't get told much about what the Dutch and the Germans did in their colonial history. The Portuguese were very nasty, as were the Spanish. So, getting back to this thing, we've got one of the largest countries to talk about, whilst Australia is a very large country. Now to talk about the Indians, and the Indians hated the British. It made, don't get me wrong, a lot of countries hated British rule. India, however, received probably the worst of it. They had people abducted, they had people murdered, a lot of rebellion was going through. You know? Even when the Indians, you know, fought back, they lost. 9 times out of 10. Why? British rule and forcibly conscripted Indian fellas. There are lots of tales of Indians fighting Indians, Pakistanis fighting Pakistanis. Why? Britain. So, this footballer, he went on to go, oh, we've had worse shit happen to us. No. Out of all of the natives of the countries, Maori aren't natives either, of New Zealand. Out of all the people who have suffered under the British colony, the Maoris got off lightly. They fucking skated on thin ice. The people who suffered were the Aborigines, were the native Indians, you know, the Indians, the Pakistanis, the Burmese, the Malaysians, the Canadians, I'm pretty sure it's just the Eskimos, I'm not too sure, Native Canadians, and of course, the Native Americans. The South Africans suffered worse than what the Maori went through. Hey, this is our fishing line. Nah, mate, sorry, dear chap, it's now ours. We hate you for it, you bastards. Yeah, well, we have this written paper that says it's ours. You can either take it or get stuffed, old chap. Fuck you. We're gonna go chop down your pole. That is the worst. And yes, wars were fought here in New Zealand, but it resulted in British rule. Why? Because the Maori would much rather aim and shoot at each other than they would do to them. The Aborigines flipped the middle bird and refused to join British colonialism. Why? They were pushed out of their homes, their ancestral lands removed. Anything they had that was theirs, gone. The South African tribes hated the British. Why? For the exact same reason that happened to the Aborigines. But even worse, they were sometimes even killed just because, like the Congolese. Why? Anyone of colour to the British, to a white man, is inferior. But out of all of the white men, out of all the countries that have a coloured population, the Maoris got the best of it. Duncannuva, how can you sit there and say that? Well, when you study the fucking history of New Zealand, you know, you can tend to sit there going, okay. That did happen, but let's talk about New Zealand in the modern day. You are. Sure. New Zealand in the modern day has had strenuous relations between both the New Zealand Pākehā, white men, and New Zealand Maori. I wonder why. Unfortunately, it's due to British. It's unfortunately due to the ties of the British. Whilst the Maori did lose land to Britain, but the Maori they didn't suffer i.e. It's like saying that, the nerd in high school is getting picked on worse than the other nerds in high school because he's friends with the bullies. The bully still picks on him, but the bully is going to give him easier time. Yes, there were acts passed within New Zealand's history to try and stop Maorism, as we'll call it for this. But, allow me to be frank, it was because of British rule. The New Zealand government, even after the First World War, was still British ruled. We still followed the British monarchy. What? Well, any idiot who can open up a book and read can automatically gets it. Oh yeah, no. British rule because of this reason. So, in short, what have I been talking about? Essentially, a football star, has basically gone, New Zealand Maori suffered the worst out of all of the British. We're basically bitching about how New Zealand suffered the worst under British rule. No. Yes, we had acts passed. Yes, we had things passed. Well, submitted, but not passed. But a lot of those acts, let me tell you, dear sir, were often placed by people of colour. And this is going to generate a lot of hate, and I don't give a shit. How can I sit there and go, this is going to happen because of people of colour? Well, because when you look into people who actually submitted the act, they're either of Maori descent or are Maori themselves. It's a bit weird trying to say that the Maori did. Yeah, but here's the thing, the Maori have been trying to play that they are the victims for hundreds of years. First of all, I have to say, it's not fooling anyone, because guess what? The Maori actually got off pretty goddamn light, as compared to, the Aborigines. They were forced out of their homes and forced out of land that they had been ruling for thousands of years before British rule. So, in short, allow me to re-summarise up this video because this is a bit of a jumble. New Zealand football star, who was Samoan, bitching about things that apparently happened, that did happen in New Zealand. Acts were submitted to the government. In that he was bitching that basically that South Africans should fuck off to Europe. Yes, this actually did happen. That Europeans should fuck off back to Europe, and of course that other people who come to New Zealand should just F off. This man is a joke. This man has not studied a history book or even seen an atlas, because if you say that South Africans came from Europe, you've just successfully pissed off all of your South African fans. South African whites and South African blacks both come from South Africa, and both hate each other. Another little interesting factoid about South Africa. It was the last British colony to actually be given independence from Britain. What do I mean? Yeah, it was until about the 1980s, early 1990s, that South Africa saw freedom from its tyrannical overlords. And to be fair, I don't really give a shit. Well, no, I do give a shit to me. What happened to South Africa really did is a real big kick in the gut, you know. But anyway, he is ignorant because he's a football star, and a lot of football stars are ignorant. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. I have listed 2 countries that have had worse times under British rule. And of course, he's basically trying to say that the Maori suffered worse than a lot of the former British colonies. Yeah, next time this idiot tries to look up at a book, he needs to look at a history book, he will find that the Aboriginals, the Indians, the South Africans, all suffered worse. Final moral of the story, the Maori that lived in New Zealand since the 1300s were actually far better treated than any other country under British rule. Yes, there were still tensions between Britain and the Maoris, I'm not denying that, but what I am saying is the fact that the Maoris suffered under British rule is bullshit, and will remain, shut up, bullshit for years, because history will prove to him, and to anyone trying to say that the Maori suffered, and that the fact that New Zealand should be a Maori country, really needs to go look at a fucking history book. I've been Duncannuva, and this has been Dear New Zealand. And like so, I meant to say this at the beginning of the video, but please share this video around. I wanted to generate content, I wanted to generate stuff, because unfortunately for a lot of New Zealand Maori, they believe that the Maori suffered worse under the British rule than other countries, and I'm just like to prove them every single fucking time that guess what, sunshine? No, you didn't. I've been Duncannuva, seen you on Superior, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.